If you're joining us on the stream, we're live. Another episode in January, more preseason fun. And I think tonight we have Phil and myself, Matt Baker. Definitely have a lot to cover as we get started here. Before we get going on the pod recording, there's a surprising amount that has happened this week. Maybe not too surprising, but
very cool.
Ready when you are, man.
Okay.
Oh. I always forget to turn off my space heater. For the first 5 minutes of just about every pod that I've done lately, the space heater has been going, and I always think
you can hear it.
I can hear it. I don't know if anybody else can hear it.
I've never noticed it. All right, I got to think about.
I'm excited to hear a typical Phil intro. It's been a long time since I've heard a good Phil intro.
I had total blank. It's going to be boring, and I'm okay with it. Here we go. Oh, come on. There we go. Welcome, everyone, to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. I was looking for a title for today's show. I got nothing, guys. We're initializing preseason is what I went with, and we are. We're about to start preseason. I think we had our first preseason match the other day going on in Florida. If not today, no. I thought I saw that one already happened, so maybe I'm wrong on that. The one shaking his head at me in disappointment, as usual, when I get facts wrong, we got Matt Baker. How's it going, man?
I would never shake my head at disappointment. Though our first preseason match, it would be completely understandable to get things confused. The club actually had to change things up. I'm doing great. I'm excited to watch watch updates on the first preseason match that St. Louis City has against Nashville Friday, January 26th. Kind of a rescheduled start to our preseason, as last weekend we had a scrimmage intra-squad down in Florida. This weekend
that's what I meant. That's what I meant. I was going to say it was an intra-squad, right?
The intra-squad, yeah. This weekend we get Nashville, and then the Columbus game that was originally scheduled for this weekend is canceled because Columbus started preseason late. Something about winning MLS Cup, getting an extra couple weeks off. I don't know. We'll find out what that's like, hopefully, this year.
Yeah. But at least things are going, and we're getting, I think my favorite thing right now is the pictures and videos that we're getting of the guys working hard. Clearly, the pace of MLS kind of stands out when you get these close-ups from people probably like our buddy Jake out down there taking videos with his iPhone up close. AZ coming back, really good vibes coming from the summer down there, or spring training down there, and winter training. Gosh, I'm all over the place tonight.
Spring training, preseason, training camp, whatever you want to call it.
Florida, soccer,
behind
baseball.
Closed doors, everything.
Let's get started, though. Let's jump into what we touched on a lot last week. And really, we've been talking about nothing but this, the Nico Gioacchini transfer to Como. And this is just massive. We've got plenty more to talk about here because it was finally announced as official on Wednesday, the 24th. That was yesterday. It feels like forever ago, but now it's finally official. We got the intro videos from Como, a lot of good stuff from Como. Matt, I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, this was building for a little while. I think there was a good 10-day window where the rumors started really heating up. We saw Nico Gioacchini actually in camp for a few days for St. Louis when the rumors first started. There was the back and forth, public-ish back and forth, where you had dueling reports between Fabrizio Romano, Manuel Veth, people trying to confirm things without things being confirmed. You were getting obvious agent reports. But at the end of the day, Wednesday, January 24th, things became official. St. Louis City SC agreed to terms to transfer forward Nico Gioacchini to Como 1907 FC, an Italian Serie B, a current Italian Serie B squad, TBD on where they'll end up later this year. But the undisclosed transfer fee heavily rumored and reported to be around $2 million. Manuel Veth actually said upwards of 2 million euros. So I think 2 million is a good round number for us to use, with add-ons that could go all the way up to 4 million. And this is huge for me. So there's a lot of things that I loved about what you and Santi said last week on the impacts this has for Nico, his U.S. national team hopes. I like what Como is receiving in reinforcement in the striker position as they make their obvious push for promotion. The top two clubs in Serie B earn an automatic promotion with a playoff occurring for that third spot. Comos currently sits second right behind Parma, so they're in a good shape as Nico joins them. One of the really interesting things that I thought as it relates to City that I added in our YouTube short this week is the way that this perception helps City in what Lutz's comments were in the article, the press release, saying it's always difficult to see one of our top performing players move on. We understand the attractiveness of joining European football and will be immensely proud to cheer Nico on as he fights for promotion. This in and of itself is a sales tactic that can be used for future budding stars, your U22s, your young DPs, your players looking to make their name in Europe, knowing that you can go to St. Louis, you can have success where you might not have had success before. They can make something of you, and then they won't stand in your way as you look to go on to a top 5 league in Europe ambitions. And then the add-ons. This is the big thing that I think St. Louis City fans have to take notice of. Add-ons in transfers, they have a myriad of things they could include, from appearances, starts, goals, contributions, trophies that the receiving club were to win. But when I see an add-on up to 2 million, the big thing in this specific circumstance that jumps out of me is promotion. We need to be cheering Como on to promotion, if nothing else, then so City can have potentially a million or two more in the coffers. And that's enough reason by itself, even if you're not a huge Nico Gioacchini fan, to say I'm all in on Como.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think I love what you were touching on with the big advertisement for joining a club like St. Louis City. A show doesn't exist where I don't regret missing something in a show, and I think that's something Santi and I really messed up not hitting hard enough. Is that it's a big advertisement for players to come to City. We're not going to hold you back. If anything, we're going to find a nice landing spot for you wherever the heck you want to go, because Lutz has that access. And, just in the news recently, we see Robinson going to FC Cincinnati from Atlanta United to go there. Rather, it's a nice short contract, 1 year with an option. Atlanta held back Robinson more than once going to Europe. We're looking at Jesus Ferreira down in Dallas just got denied a transfer to Spartak Moscow. That
There's a lot behind that.
Yeah, there is. I mean, hey, I'm not going to comment on whether he should or should not go there, but I will say that Dallas is the one that stood in the way that Jesus was open to going there. Maybe there's rumors that maybe he did want to go there. And so St. Louis is not a club like that. You come here, you have an opportunity to leave. That's fine. And we're going to talk about why that's fine, I think, going forward. And Lutz is a big a linchpin to why that's okay.
Yeah, and the opportunity for a Nico Gioacchini replacement is vast, especially with Lutz, with his contacts, his Rolodex that exists, and who he's been shown to be able to bring in from all across the world, different portions of the world. One thing that I do want to say before moving on is in the chat, there's a couple nice comments from Elliot Meyer, first of all, about that Como streams all their games for free. So if you're talking about not just cheering on Como because of Nico or wanting them to be promoted for additional money to City, you can go to Como's website and they have all their games streaming for free on there, which is amazing for a Serie B club. And I think we're all getting ready to book our vacationing plans to Como and that beautiful little alcove or cove that their stadium is in. So I'll enjoy watching them on
Are you
Saturday
going to say
morning.
the Joe Miller comment? The Joe Miller comment's the best. Seeing the Como Stadium pics, we're all having Como FOMO. Yes, we are. Como FOMO. And streaming, I was unbelievably, so many happy curse words flowed out of my mouth when I saw that Twitter post that they stream all of their games. That's something MLS can't even do in preseason. And they're over here streaming for us all on their own website, Serie B games. I'm so freaking happy we're going to get to see Nico play.
It's clearly exciting, and you can see him speaking Italian to the fans on some of their videos. I mean,
Yes,
and
love it.
with an Italian father and having played there for 4 years between the ages of 8 and 12. I mean, this is such a great move for him and an awesome opportunity to earn a spot in the top 5 league and to really claw his way back into that national team landscape ideally. But looking at what City does from here, our depth chart at striker is a little thin now with 4 competitions on the horizon, potentially three competitions being played concurrently up until the month of April or May, June, if we make it that far in CONCACAF Champions Cup. But having Klaus, Sam Adeniran, and Caden Glover as our legit out and out strikers, that is a little thin. And I think that's why we're going to touch on it in a minute. The striker rumors have already started cropping up, and serious rumors too. We're talking deals being made and agreed upon, except for a transfer fee, saying we're willing to give the player for the right cost, and City making an actual offer for players. Manuel Veth reporting that there were 6 strikers being looked at. Lutz is wasting no time. But I go back and forth on the whole, how urgently do we need a replacement striker? And there's a lot of things that go into that. First thing that goes into that is the primary transfer window of MLS. It's different, and I think I don't know if I was specific enough in my YouTube video of what the primary transfer window can do. It is primarily for trades. I'll stand by that in that a lot of MLS trades happen during that time. But a transfer window in and of itself is just the timeline that you can register a new player, a new transfer incoming to your country, to your league. MLS's primary transfer window runs January 31st to April 23rd. Can be, and will be signings from abroad that will happen in this time period. So when we talk about the January transfer window, don't put too much stock necessarily in if we don't have a striker signed by January 31st, it's not happening. Quite the opposite, I would argue, in that they might not help us in CONCACAF Champions Cup, these first 2 legs at least, but they may be somebody who can come in and have a say for US Open Cup come April. And that's just saying that we can sign a player and we can register their ITC in America with MLS between January 31st and April 23rd. It's a big window that kind of bridges a gap, so to speak, between that and the secondary transfer window that opens in mid-July. It kind of plays by international timelines, but not really. So we kind of have a significant runway of time to bring in one of these remaining 5 strikers that Manuel Veth says we're interested in.
Silly question here, and I'm sorry if you don't know the answer. I don't like to do this to you cold like this, but you probably know it because you're Matt Baker. Are they allowed to leave a European club outside the transfer window? Because let's
Yeah.
say we sign them after January 31st, it's only incoming that the
Yes.
transfer window has effect on in Europe. Okay,
Right.
that's news to me.
Correct. And you can go back to MLS's transfer tracker to verify this because they have that
Mm-hmm.
transfer tracker on their website. And you could go back pages and pages ago. I think I went back to the 14th page, which got started into around February to April of 23. And you can see players coming in from Germany, from Mexico, from England in that time period between January 31st and April. It hasn't always been this exact time frame, but it's somewhere around right before the season starts and a month or 2 into the season. That's the basic time frame. But it has happened, it will happen. And so we may sign, and this might throw City fans for a loop because they're thinking January transfer window, that February and March could be just as easily we bring in a player. It's all about their incoming country of origin. That's the transfer, because you could look on Transfermarkt right now and you could see
Mm-hmm.
transfer windows for all these countries, and it all means incoming to that country.
Good clarification for someone like me. That's good stuff. Andrew Felder corrected me. I forgot. Jesus Ferreira wasn't shut down by Dallas. MLS
Oh
proper shut
yeah.
that down. We're not going to talk about that tonight. I'm sure we'll have another chance to talk about that. That's a wild one. That's a really wild one that we'll talk about next time it happens because it will happen again. But yeah, this one with Tuchert didn't work out. Did we talk enough about this to talk about how he's got a contract up at the end of in 6 more months at the end of the next by
Yeah.
the time the next transfer season comes up, and so this could still happen. I think Menwave said for now this is over.
Right. I
So there's a lot that could still come. There's still more strikers available.
Mhm.
But yeah, go ahead, Matt. Tell me what
He's
you know.
obviously still on our radar. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
takeaway here. Cedric Tuchert, you probably haven't heard the last of him. at least in interest from St. Louis. But the fact that we weren't able to work out a deal where reports that Hanover valued his transfer at 600,000 pounds, that puts him in 800K, just under 800K in a transfer fee, US dollars, I believe, if I had that conversion correctly. But because Hanover wanted such a significant fee, we heard reports that Lutz had offered around 500,000 as a transfer fee, which would put his valuation directly in line with what Lutz paid reportedly for guys like Tomas Totland and Nicholas Dewar. So he clearly has a penchant for this 500,000 range on signing new players. It also would have probably been in line with Nico Gioacchini type thing, where you obviously GAM probably would have been used in this case, but Nico Gioacchini was making just under 400,000 for St. Louis City. So you look at salary plus transfer fee and available GAM that we had, and that is the one other note that I do want to make on Nico Gioacchini is that there's factors in play on what we have available to replace him, not just his salary of 400,000 in we understand that Lutz doesn't want to go too far beyond that kind of a range. He's not looking to sign a DP as a replacement for Nico Gioacchini, for instance. That was reported by Manuel Veth. But the amount of transfer money that we had for Nico, not all of it can go directly into the budget for the club. The way this happens is there can be a set amount that you can convert from the transfer fee to GAM. It's right now 1.157 million. So up to 1.157 million of the $2 million transfer fee can be converted into GAM, which makes it directly applicable to our roster. And that's the increase in what we can spend on our roster just based on this transfer. It's not 2, it's not 4, it's 1.157. And that's where I think I don't know where it is in the show notes, but I'm going to mention it now. The year over year salary that St. Louis is paying, the roster spend is going to start rising. It will inherently, because when a team first starts play in MLS, they are basically scraping the barrel on what they have to spend with GAM. The reason GAM is so valuable is that you can acquire it through a bunch of different means, and that's the mechanism for you to go above and beyond this hard salary cap, or the soft salary cap rather, of whatever it is now. I don't have the number in front of me, 5 or 6 million. And the more GAM you've acquired, the more on top of that you can spend. The league gives out set amounts of GAM every single year. As an expansion side, we got a little bit more. We got about 1 million more of GAM to start as kind of a way to get us going. But this deal in particular is how we're going to be able to spend more on our roster. The more outgoing transfers we have for this type of a dollar amount, or in the hundreds of thousands, or the $1 million to $2 million amount, the more we do of that, the more we can convert the transfer fee into GAM, the more we can reinvest in the actual roster spend. That's the linchpin of how St. Louis is going to be able to spend more on the roster within the rules of MLS and without splashing cash on a DP.
Yeah, it's almost like a bit of a cheat, kind of like we talked about in the past with U22s, with some of those roster slots with homegrowns. Only a certain amount is hitting that cap, whereas the rest is just pure value, it sounds like. Is that kind of the idea there?
Yeah, basically. And it's, in a perfect world, we would go the way of NWSL, who is phasing out allocation money over the next couple of years.
Great shout. Yes. Look
And
into that, everyone.
huge kudos to NWSL. Google NWSL allocation money, because you'll get articles and news stories of their plan to ramp down from it.
Yeah.
And they're correspondingly increasing the actual salary cap, which just provides so much more flexibility to all teams. That's the kind of move you want to see MLS do, but at least until 2027 or so, when the CBA goes till, we're not going to see that with MLS. And so we have to play by these rules of finding ways to increase the GAM we have in the bank so that we can pay players, but it doesn't count against the actual salary cap. We did a show last year, I think it was November 2022, called MLS 201. So shameless plug for a previous episode to check that out. And of course, it was only a matter of time. Tom Bogert on his YouTube channel did one as well just recently for those nuances. So if you're feeling nutty and feel like getting into MLS roster rules and why GAM exists and how we can take advantage of all that jazz, we've got a show, and it's something that I don't mind spending time on because I'm a nerd like that.
Well, and it's good for us to hear over and over. I said this about the MLS 201 episode, that you could probably listen to it 10 times and still learn something. There's just like packed full of data. And when we're listening instead of reading, it's just, you catch something new every time. Last thing, first of all, I want to say, if you're joining us on the radio, we are Flyover Footy. You're listening on the big 550 KTRS. Thank you so much for listening to us here as we talk about Nico Gioacchini and the massive transfer that happened from him to Italian soccer team Como 1907 FC. And it's just a massive historic transfer and something that's not massively common in MLS. So this is something that's special, not just for our club, but for MLS in general and for the U.S. national team, if you're into that kind of thing. And I certainly am. Lastly, let's talk about, I just want to touch shortly. You didn't get to give your opinion, and I asked you in DMs, and I want to hear you give it now. And I'll shortly give mine. That, do we get a striker now? Do we need to get a striker now? Do we want to get a striker now? These are the questions I have for you, Matt. And I'm kind of claiming, as I did last time, that I think Lutz has this short list that if it works out for, let's say, these 6 strikers that have been mentioned by Manuel Veit, that if one of those 6 says yes and works in all these other areas, as far as price, contract, all these variables work perfectly for Lutz to bring someone in now, I think he does it. And if those things don't work within our means, then it's not going to happen right now. I love how, Matt, you said something like Lutz isn't going to force something just to fill a gap right this second. He's always looking to the future. Nukvi Thorson, I keep hearing his name come up, and he barely played last year, and it just feels like everyone was ready for him to hit the ground running this season. So that's just a good example. But Matt, what do you think? Now, like, get one now no matter what? Middle ground? Wait, where are you on this spectrum?
Oh, I'm firmly in the wait, if that's the spectrum. I don't think we need to desperately go out and get a player right now. I will say, and this is what I said in our DMs, that the 2 words are really overriding, that'll make or break our need to acquire somebody in this primary transfer window for MLS. Rasmus Alm. Those are my 2 words. And the reason is, I mentioned we have Klaus, Sam Adeniran, and Caden Glover as our out-and-out strikers. We also have Nukvi Thorson, who is a forward. When he was brought on as highlights, as historical from the left side. He's a left wing, second striker up top. Bradley Carnell said very clearly he could play all 3 forward positions. He can play across the board. We actually saw him play limited minutes, very limited, on the right side last year in the second half of one of the games. So he can do it. But Rasmus Alm was also a second striker in a few instances, a few appearances last year, and he provides a lot of what we need in our attacking right side, in the press, in his playmaking abilities. He's a facilitator, his passing, he's crisp all across the board, but he's recovering from surgery and he's not going to be ready to start the season. That's what we've been told. So with Rasmus Alm not able to start the season, his timeline is really going to drive how comfortable I am if we don't bring in a player. Obviously, I would be much more comfortable if we did. I think Lutz identifying a player, getting him for the right cost, signing him, and being able to plug and play as early as possible is option A. But we've seen with Cedric Tukert that if the price isn't right, he's not going to reach. And that's important to note. He's not going to reach in this transfer window for a player because he probably believes, like I do, that you have Nukvi Thorson who could step in up there. Nukvi Thorson was signed for this year and beyond. He was not signed to be a massive difference maker last year. Lutz and Bradley both said as much. So having Thorson as a kind of cover for your second striker, in addition to Sam, Klaus, and Caden, you wonder what kind of a leap you're going to see from Caden Glover, first of all, because we know Klaus and Sam can hold it down. We don't know if we're going to be running a 4-2-3-1 or 4-4-2 more often, so that depth could come into play, but this is Caden Glover's opportunity. And he's only 16 years old, so it's not saying it's make or break by any means. Quite the opposite. This is his introduction to significant minutes. So we don't know really what we're going to see from Caden at the MLS level with consistent playing time and more minutes and a consistent opportunity probably in the second half of most games. But that's 2 unproven in MLS players who you're relying on as potential depth behind your top 2 strikers. That's a lot of ifs to go into the season with, knowing that you have at least 4 matches in 2 weeks to start the season. If you move on in CONCACAF Champions Cup, then you're just multiplying that. You have 8 matches in 4 weeks, and then you start US Open Cup. that's a lot of matches for a Rasmus Almless team to go into. And I don't mean to put everything on him, but man, does he add to that flexibility that we could have. And it's a downstream effect because if you have Rasmus Alm able to provide cover up front as a forward, second striker, then you're bringing in some of that midfield depth that you want to see shine. You're bringing in Tomas Ostrak for more minutes, Celio Pompeu for more minutes, Indy Vasilev. You're still having AZ. You're still having Edu Leuven able to take a step up. So it's a downstream effect of if Rasmus Alm's in there, what he can cover. If he's not in there, then the likelihood of a 4-4-2, I really don't know because the depth isn't there with experience. I mean, you're going to toss Caden Glover into a Miggy Perez role from last year is essentially what you're looking to do if you run that kind of an
That's
offense with the
true.
current roster.
Yeah, a lot of good comments coming in here. Andrew Felder says Celio needs in the kitchen. He got a shout at the striker role, just like Matt, you had
Mm-hmm.
brought up before, as had Santiago. Tim Parker's bucket hat said, I think if we stuck with our current guys, given Glover time, and get somebody in the summer, he's fine with that, it sounds like. Someone who's not getting enough talk here, that I was going to say this too. Elliot Meyer says McSorley more likely to be signed if we don't bring someone else in. He's asking, I guess, actually not signed necessarily, but he's there. And if he shines, he could get more time than Glover. It could happen. These
It
guys coming
definitely
from
could.
college are more like veteran senior type players, even if the talent level is definitely different and maybe more random, I would say, in how much they stick out. Look at what happened with that striker at I forgot his name, but at Orlando City. I don't think anyone saw him being as good as he ended up being. He just
Oh,
played in
Duncan
January
McGuire.
camp. Thank you.
Yeah.
Also hashtag save Jacqueline. I have to stick that in at every opportunity I can. We need to move on here. But I just want to say that I might have been more, just like you, Matt, you kind of touched on it. I might have been more fine with just rolling with who we have, no matter what, unless we found the perfect guy. But that CONCACAF Champions Cup, I mean, we have so many competitions right now. And so, yeah, I'm with you.
You wonder though, and I'll just throw this out. The short-term loan exists still from affiliates, and the
Yeah.
way that works is you can loan a player up. So a player who's not on a city contract, a player who's on a City 2 contract can be loaned up to 4 times a season, but he can only make 2 appearances in league matches. So you don't want to burn players too early, but at the same time you wonder how quick Bradley Carnell might be pulling that trigger, or
Yeah.
Lutz might be saying, let's give, I mean, that example. So McSorley, the reason I bring this up is McSorley. So first of all, he's a 3rd-round draft pick. So his being signed directly to City would be almost unparalleled over the past few years. But that kind of a player could be an option if he impresses in camp, because he's in camp with the big boys right now. If he impresses in camp, that could be an option. Sign him to City 2, bring him in for a match early. You have open roster slots. If you sign him to City 2 now, you could offer him a contract at any point in the season. That's fine. There's flexibility there.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if we're talking depth and what we're going to be doing in matches, especially CONCACAF Champions Cup and definitely US Open Cup, I wonder how much we're going to leverage some of this other depth that we have access to.
Absolutely. The more the better, in my opinion. And I think you guys probably at this point know that I'm mad at MLS for not letting us have more loan ups from City to open it up, guys. If they want us to get more games in, you got to open up the roster so we can use our depth, our full depth as much as possible. Speaking of depth, we're losing a little bit of personnel depth here with this move, but I think we're all pretty positive about it for the most part, especially here at Flyover Footy. Miguel Perez gets the season-long loan to Birmingham Legion with an option to recall throughout the entire season, which is a very nice option. Matt, would you like to kind of lead us a little bit more forward with some of these details?
This one is, I think the writing was a little bit on the wall. Miggy's been kind of a polarizing figure, to be honest. He obviously had the exciting moment last year against Vancouver with his first goal with right after his high school graduation. I mean, that was just probably the loudest City Park has ever been, and maybe for a bit. But his injury later in the season, he didn't really come back. He was kind of shut down, given time to recoup and rest. He was obviously with City. We saw him in the EMLS video that they put out up until recently. And so this is one of those deals that makes sense for both parties. It's like an Isak Jensen deal where you can see that there's clear talent there. There is length on the contract. He's going to come back and he's going to have a long, healthy career with St. Louis City. But in the meantime, with Edu Leuven, with Jabula Blom, with Chris Durkin, with Indy Vasilev able to play the midfield, there is an abundance of wealth. And so what we understand over in Birmingham is that there is an opportunity for him to step in, and they appear to have a real need at that center defensive mid, center mid. According to Kaylor Hodges, your friend from the USL show who covers them well, he's saying that the team, and I'll let you talk about Matthew Corcoran here, but with Mikey Lopez, they have an opportunity to slide in. What I'm seeing is Mikey Lopez at right back. Miggy has a chance to start at center mid, potentially a 4-2-3-1. Like, there's a lot to like about what options are there from Birmingham. And so more playing time for Miggy, I'm all about it.
Yeah, and it's really cool because, first of all, Birmingham Legion is a quality club. They have a good coach, and the coach is willing to play young players. Matthew Corcoran is a 17-year-old, or no, 16, 17. He's 17-year-old, but he's a U17 national team player who played in this last World Cup quite a bit at the sixth role. And yes, the scary thing is, yes, that's the same role as Miguel Perez, but the fact that the coach is willing to play those players. Something I heard from Kaylor Hodges is that he plays them and gives them their chance, but the second they start, wavering, having too many games that are bad in a row, he will pull them. And so that's good and bad, right? Like Miguel's going to get a good test. Something that we hear about the USL Championship is that it is a professional environment. You're up against veterans who this is also, it's their paycheck, right? We got guys like Mikey Lopez. Enzo Martinez is a USL legend. He got some time with Colorado Rapids. He's a quality player. And, he plays sometimes, he played deeper in the field at the 6 and 8 role last year, which is new to me because I know him as more of a playmaker as a winger or a number 10. Who knows where these guys are going to play? Matt, you mentioned that Mikey Lopez might play right back, but he can also play in central midfield. So Birmingham has a lot of people they can play with here, and it's going to be a test of whoever's best at any given moment. Miguel is going to get a lot of experience on what it means to be a professional this year. And I don't think these guys are going to throw him under the bus and, do that whole thing where they like injure him. No, these guys are happy to bring along someone like Matthew Corcoran. And I think they'll welcome Miguel with open arms, show him the ropes, teach him how to be a good pro. And hopefully we get a Sam Adeniran situation where he gains a lot of experience, gets his confidence, gets his feet under him in a tough environment, a professional environment, and comes back better than ever. And I think that is quite possible, if not likely. I'm just so happy that it went so well for Sam last year. And I really do think this is a perfect landing spot for Miguel. And I look forward to watching him in preseason as we're going to get some streams here with
Yes.
Atlanta United playing Birmingham Legion. And
How about that?
yeah, so this is a really exciting move for me. I know some people are uneasy, but I'm just here to try to help you guys. Guys, I come from the USL show. I'm obsessed with the USL. I think they don't get as much respect that they deserve, and I'm happy that Miguel's landing here, and I think everyone should be.
Yeah, Miguel Perez, one of those under contract long term, so we don't have to worry about where he's going to land after this. This gets him some experience with an option to recall throughout the season. That's
Yeah,
the big thing. Just
and he
like
will be,
Sam,
right? Like he
he,
will
yeah,
be probably.
I would be shocked if he ended the season with Birmingham still. I mean, we saw how injuries just borderline decimated St. Louis for periods of time last
Yeah,
year, from illnesses to outright injuries, even national team call ups. Like, the Olympics are coming up this summer, guys. And we have two potential players on our roster who may be gone for significant periods of time. Where do those two players play? The midfield, the attacking midfield, but they're midfielders nonetheless. Indy Vasilev and AZ Jackson. It's a potential. You don't know how the year's going to go. So there's a lot of things that could change. Option recall is huge. And like Phil said, I'm excited to watch Miggy Perez for Birmingham. If he gets in this first game, which is Saturday, January 27th against Atlanta United on all of Atlanta United's socials, they've got it on Facebook, X, YouTube. Tune in. I'm going to look forward to seeing him. I hope we get to watch him. And if not, if we don't get to see him in preseason, Birmingham's regular season starts March 9th at Phoenix. It's a 9:30 p.m. game. I can't wait to follow Miggy. It's just another club for us to follow and
yeah.
cheer on one of our loanees.
Last thing, I think the only negative thing that I was like, I see why people are saying this. Like they said, is this is our youth system failing, right? Because Miguel's going on loan? Absolutely not. I would say this
Mm,
is proof that it's working, that someone USL wants him and is willing to take him from our system after
mhm.
some MLS minutes last year. A lot of MLS minutes for a guy his age, honestly. But you look at, I don't think any of us would look at what Sam Adeniran did last year as a failure, and he's in his 20s. I mean, guys, Miguel is 19 years old, and he's going to go on loan at the age of 19 to a very professional club. And then he's going to come back. And, you look at Joe Key getting transferred out in his mid to early 20s, it's Miguel is so young. This is such an early move for him. There is so much in the future for him. Let's not get worried about a 19-year-old going on loan to a very quality club. Let's, just wait and see how this plays out and how the next three homegrown players that we have play out. There's just so much to come. There's more homegrowns coming. We got to leave space for more homegrowns. So we can't sign too many homegrowns. Like, this is a massive conversation I shouldn't dig into too much, but I'm excited for the future, and I'm not at all disheartened by this.
There's one thing I want to touch on. There's a couple questions in the chat that I think would help inform some of these things as we pivot to some preseason notes. Is that Daniel Guevara asks, how does all this work with the roster needing to be set by February 23rd? And the February 23rd date is actually roster compliance date. It's just the date that clubs need to be compliant and have all of their X's and O's marked, and they have their GAM spent, and they have their international players set. It's not saying you can't bring in players after February 23rd. It's just saying that if you have 8 international roster slots, you
Mm-hmm.
can't have 9 players contracted and be in compliance. It's roster compliance only. You have to be playing by the rules as of February 23rd. And that also plays into Tim Parker's bucket hat question of what's the current roster slots, international slots. So currently, right now, St. Louis has no open international roster slots. With the players on loan, with the players signed, we are right there. I believe it is sitting at 9, if I had my numbers right. And so we don't have space right now to sign an international player. We don't have a space to sign Kojima, our super draft pick, Jose Kojima. So we'll need to make a move if we want to sign them or send somebody out on loan. That will need to be firmed up by February 23rd. From a roster slot perspective, we basically have 5 open roster slots. 3 of those are because of our 3 guys on loan, Jensen, Pedro, and Miguel Perez. And then there are 2 out and out open roster slots. This is after, of course, the Nico Gioacchini sale. So room to maneuver. And that is quite a few open slots when you're talking about an MLS club with so many competitions
Oh,
coming
yeah.
up.
Yeah, and honestly, I think at least one needs to be filled sooner than later. But I think they're trying to figure out who's the best person for that, which is a scary, scary decision. And I want to say too, like that roster, the day where you have to declare who is what, that's
Mhm.
also where you declare right where the money is being shifted from one column to another. That we look
Mhm.
at, you sent us a little spreadsheet on like what money we have, and it was like your best guess. That's where the club has to like put their money where their mouth is and say where it is, right?
One thing I do want to say on that is that was my best guess at our buckets, but the takeaway to that you showed last week of the how much GAM I think we have, TAM, and our salary cap is the total number. So I was playing around with the buckets, and you can allocate GAM certain places. I
Yeah.
think we're spending the bare minimum of GAM to be roster compliant in the salary cap, and so that's where I was driving a lot of those numbers from. But that's really what we need to do is be compliant by February 23rd in where everything's allocated. The last thing I want to really cover in Chris Gebhardt mentions this is the green card news. We have to cover this, and I think our listeners on the Big 550 KTRS would appreciate this in the segment we have for them. We don't have any news on green card changes, and I did reach out directly to the club, and they did say that if there is news to be had, it would be delivered by the people you would expect to deliver it, Lutz or Diego. If they're going to say it, if something's to be said, they'll say it. And currently, there's no news. To add on to this, we have heard that prior to his loan this past year, Selmer Pedro was scheduled for a green card interview this past November, one that did not take place because he was loaned out. So we use that information, and with all the assumptions that that was true, you can kind of parse out potentialities for some of these other players that we've speculated on. And Selmer Pedro was, of course, the first signed player to St.
Mm.
Louis City, except for Josh Yarrow on a 1-1 deal. He was the first announced directly to City back in February 2022. If Selmir Pedro was signed in February 22 and he has his green card interview on November 23, that's a significant time period. And it is vastly different from some players. It's right in line with other players in MLS. And the big thing that I think we need to keep in mind is that there's a lot of key roles, key things, key factors here with green cards. The attorneys play a huge role. There's a metric ton of paperwork that our friend Mario with Santos can tell you all about because he does that for a living. And then the other thing that, from all indications, looking at all of the different players who have gotten green cards, is that every process is different. We're hearing that players that have played in multiple countries, the process could be easier than for a player that's only played in one country. So there's a lot of factors at play for guys like Berkey, Klaus, Leuven, Ostrak, and Nilsson, who came in more or less all at the same time and have been in America this entire time, who are going to be our first men up when it comes to potential green cards.
Yeah, and I like Matt what you said. There's like so many variables here, and unfortunately, there's not enough information for us to make a definite guess at what's going on, honestly. And so, there's a kind of no response from the club, and so we see some clubs are able to get some players done in anywhere from a year to 3 years, right, to get green cards for these
Yep.
players we've been seeing announced in the last 3 months, especially. And so you might look at St. Louis and you might say, well, nothing's happened for us. Are we dropping the ball? These are questions we might ask because there's an absence of information here, no announcements to be had. So that's an option, right? That's one of the options that maybe they have not done a perfect job with this. And then something occurred to me today. I was just trying to think with my capitalist brain. What if, so like if we're buying international slots for $200,000, $250,000 is what they've been going in GAM, right? In Garber Bucks, TAM, whatever.
GAM, you
And
can't trade TAM.
sorry, GAM. Thank you. And so that's fake money. And then I started thinking, well, what does a green card lawyer or a lawyer trying to take care of a green card. I'm so sorry for my terminology being so bad. But a lawyer trying to take care of a green card, what does that man cost, right? Man or woman? Like that person might cost $50,000 to $100,000 of real dollars. And, Lutz might look at that and be like, well, to me, GAM is easier and cheaper in the long run because I can just get an international slot from Nashville who doesn't even want them, right? For 250,000. But I have to give $50,000 or more to this lawyer to get one green card or something like that. Who knows what the real money situation is? But it just occurred to me like this could be as easy as follow the money, as dollars and cents. So, like maybe the lawyer costs more than just buying an international slot. And so you have to wonder like what's going to happen. What would have happened if Cedric Tukert was like ready to come to St. Louis? What would have happened? Would we have announced a green card like magically appeared? Would we have found a way to get an international slot? Because we have zero right now, Matt, right? You can back me up on this?
I've speculated and I'm almost sold on the fact that if we sign a player from across the sea or from South America, an international player, it's going to come with a corresponding international slot trade. It will happen, and it'll probably be in that $150,000 $200,000 range, like you're saying. And that move in and of itself it's almost like robbing from Peter to pay Paul, because you're shifting around the fake Garber Bucks from buying down player salaries and basically increasing the roster spend to bringing in an international slot. You're not spending real money in any sense, but you're taking away the bucket that you can spend real money for.
Yeah. Matt, we're kind of out of time. And I think we all got our thoughts in about the green card here. Is there anything you want to touch on in the next like 2 or 3 minutes?
I want a quick hit preseason update so far, just for the radio portion. We'll deep dive in our full pod in the wind down. But as we record this on January 25th and it airs this weekend, St. Louis City will have already played their first preseason match against Nashville SC on Friday, January 26th. Check out social media to find out how that match went and what all occurred. Bradley Carnell really said in the pregame interview that he's not looking for specific roster battles. This is to get a baseline going on. So this is the beginning of everything that's to come. We know from a personnel perspective, U17 player Carson Locker came and went. He's back in St. Louis now. He has school, so he can't miss that. You look at City 2 players like, or really City Academy player Nick Bishop is still in camp. City 2 player Michael Wenzel is still in camp. Caden Glover, Tyson Pierce, Jose Kojima, Brendan McSorley. They've arrived in camp, our super draft picks. So the band's all here. Carson Locker has departed, and the team returns to St. Louis Friday night to train in St. Louis all this next week before going to California on Friday, February 2nd. Little look ahead for City.
Good stuff. Lots more to come. Preseason news is just getting kicked off, guys, and we're going to hit it really hard. Again, if you're listening on the radio, we do have a podcast, and you can listen to more details. We kind of deep dive, have a little bit more of a laid-back conversation in the second half. In the wind down is what we call it. So check out our podcast if you'd like more. Otherwise, thanks so much for listening and joining us. We're Flyover Footy on the big 550 KTRS. Talk to you guys next time. See you later. All right, we're out.
Hooray. Our first radio portion with just you and me this year.
That's true. That's strange to think, isn't it? It's strange to think that we're already sending files off to KTRS.
Do you remember one of the first pods that we recorded live together back in like 2019 at your house?
No. Oh yeah.
It was the cicada night.
My house?
It was the cicada night. I heard a thing on the radio today about this year being the perfect storm of cicadas. Like the 13 years and the 7 years, this is like the first time in 220 years that all the cicadas are coming out. And it reminded me of that one recording we did in your backyard where, the cicadas had a larger role than any of our hot takes.
Did we build a fire for that one?
Yeah.
I thought we did. That's nice. I'm glad we did that.
Real old school.
Very. I totally forgot that the bugs were so loud in that recording. They were.
I don't think it's like PTSD. Every time I hear the word cicada, I just immediately have a flashback. That's what you think of? Yeah, that's what I think of.
When I was 15, it wasn't like the perfect year, but it was the last really big year. When I was a lifeguard, so I was like pulling them out of the pool every single day. That's what I think of with cicadas. Yeah. I'm going to grab one more drink. Come right back. Is that okay?
Yeah, sounds good. We'll be back in just a couple minutes, folks. While we wait, maybe I can change the brightness on this thing because my face looks so washed out. My Como jersey. I need them to release new sizes for those Como jerseys. I don't fit into the ones they have available. And that's assuming I can pay shipping, which is hefty.
Is it? Did you look into it?
It's like €50 or something like that for shipping. I saw somebody, where did I see this? I want to say Reddit. It was Reddit or Facebook, and they're trying to crowdsource. I'm gonna have to look it up. They were trying to crowdsource jerseys. Let's talk about this to intro the pod when you get back, because that's a fun one.
Here we go. Welcome everyone to the wind down. There's a little fat.
That was so sad. I forgot we do that. I'm not gonna lie. I totally forgot, and I'm not drinking
your sound
can.
Effect.
I'm so.
It was like a panicked. Oh yeah.
I go and grab a bottle. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I had
That
something
was
else I was getting ready to do, and
I love it.
this is the thing I'm drinking tonight is an NA drink. Actually, it's called Kloschtaler. I don't know if anybody's had
Ooh.
uh, NA beers from Trader Joe's. It's dry January after all, so this is one of the best NA beers I have ever had. They have two styles. I don't know what they really are. One's IPA dry hopped something. It's totally preseason form. But
Yeah,
if you're
agree,
seeing the
Chris.
stream, yeah, Trader Joe's from Germany, best NA beer I've ever had.
That's great. I've been hearing people getting excited about NA beers this year. That's been like a 2023, 2024 sort of thing to
Yeah,
be happening.
Schlafly and Urban Chestnut each have new ones.
Good.
Urban Chestnut has one they're trying out, and you actually can play a part in feedback to improve it. And then Schlafly just came out with their new pale ale.
Uh, this Manhattan is full of alcohol. So if I start ranting later, we know what
I'll
the
hold you down.
culprit is. Yes, please do. Please do cut me off.
One of the things we were talking about right before we came back, and I wanted to save it, is there was a comment that I need to have a Como jersey as my new backdrop. And it reminded me that there is an active Reddit post from somebody trying to crowdsource orders for Como FC gear. And because Como FC is obviously in Serie B and they're not a huge outfit, they don't have a league to sell their gear like MLS. They sell things locally and through their shop, and that's it. And shipping is rather outrageous. It's like 45 to 56 euro. And this guy on Reddit, shout out to Rob under STL under 63123, is trying to organize a bulk order of Como FC gear.
Oh,
He says he added 58 items to his cart to see if shipping would be affected, and it didn't look like it. This guy is the real hero, doing the legwork, trying to crowdsource
I
Como gear
love
for
it.
St. Louis fans. If you're into it, check out the St. Louis City SC subreddit and join in, because that would be hilarious if that went through.
It I want to tell a quick story. Can I tell a quick story? We want. I didn't wait for your answer, but we went to an Orlando City preseason game one year. My brothers-in-law and me, and we it was they were playing an Icelandic club, and so I think either messaged Sean Reynolds just like out of the blue to see if he would answer. Former St. Louis City or St. Louis FC center back, current academy coach for St. Louis City,
Mm-hmm.
and because he played in Iceland for a little while. And I was like, what is this club they're playing? We want to buy shirts, but we don't know anything about them. He's like, oh, they were my Icelandic club's rivals. And so I was like, okay, great. Like, what should we scream at your rivals during the game? And I can't remember what he said, but it was a fun interaction. We bought jerseys just by emailing their comms director, and they sent
Oh, wow.
jerseys for us. We still paid for them, right? We bought them,
Of course, of
but
course.
they sent them to the game and had them ready for us. That was awesome. It was so cool of them to do that. So good story there, including a St. Louis connection there. But I maybe reach out to the comms. Who knows? They might help us out there.
You never know once they get wind of it. You never know what might happen. They might just ship a handful of Nico jerseys for the club to raffle off or something. That would be something.
I would love that. Yeah. Where should we go next, though, Matt? We kind of barely touched on preseason camp notes. There's some good stuff there. We have lots of other news to touch
Yeah,
on as well.
I'm just impressed at the notion that Carson Locker got another look. That's a name that
Love
we
that.
clearly need to be remembering. Midfielder Carson Locker with the U17s. If you remember, at the end of last season, when Indiana Vasilev had his youth national team call up with the Olympic squad, Carson Locker was brought into training for a period of time to help kind of fill that gap, get some experience. It sounds like he's built up quite a partnership with Edu Leuven in that mentorship role. Tim Parker last week had some really good things to say about the young guys who were in camp, and Locker is obviously one of those players who's kind of, as Parker was saying, kind of getting out of his shell. So it was really interesting to see him in camp for a significant period of time to start. And then Michael Wenzel, Nick Bishop, those are the other guys for me. I love seeing, and this is, I don't know if this is maybe completely coincidental, but the fact that there's one U17 player, one UPSL player, one City 2 player, all invited to camp. That seems too coincidental to be actual coincidence. Like, it seems, you know what I mean? And I just like the fact that we're giving a look to each one of these types of players. Maybe it's the fact that, Bishop has some downtime between the UPSL game that they want, or before the UPSL playoff game, because this was, I'm not sure the circumstances. I just know that they're pulling one player from each of these squads, and it's exciting to see because that's helping them get that kind of experience with the first squad in a preseason, just knowing what it's like, getting that competition and getting looks. Because if there's and we'll touch on AZ Jackson in a minute, but AZ mentioned just getting a look at national team camp. It's huge for coaches that don't know you that well,
Mhm.
and you have an opportunity to prove yourself, to play and to talk to them, to sell yourself. The more they know, the more they're likely to take further looks. And that's what we're seeing with Carson Locker, with Nick Bishop, with Michael Venzel. And it's exciting for their future with City.
Yeah, and you can tell something. Just watching Kanan Glover last year, you could kind of tell in preseason training like what he was about, and you could tell like why he was a step above. It wasn't because he was like nails on going to score a goal. I feel like there was more nuance to his game that you might not see in an academy game, and it's really interesting to see whether or not he can do those sorts of things, those like hold up play, the
Mm-hmm.
flick ons, like those sort of things. Can he do that on the upper level? And I saw him do it in training in preseason. Now, I don't know if he can sustain it, right? But he sure looked good in certain looks, had really good ideas. And that's the sort of thing if you can build on, if you can do that with the upper echelon, that's saying a lot. And you don't know till you try, right? And so getting these guys in with the adults, seeing what they're about on the upper level when you have almost no time on the ball, especially with City, right? So like seeing what they're capable of in these situations is super helpful. And I'm so glad they've gotten the chance to give it a shot and for the coaches to see it as well.
Yeah, and you're seeing your homegrowns here. Tyson Pierce is here. I think he wasn't. At least my understanding is he's here. There was I believe he's there. Carnell referenced him kind of offhanded as if uh, asking if he said his name earlier. But my understanding is Tyson Pierce was not with the club last week. That's what Carnell said last week. But he is with the club now, joining Jose Kojima, Brandon McSorley. The youngsters are here. These guys that we want to see looks at, and we saw a few videos of them in training. I think we saw an unfortunate video of Jose Kojima publicly saying something negative about toasted ravioli. Uh-oh.
Oh, him
You're gonna
and
have to get him a better
McSorley.
batch. That's all I'm
Yeah,
saying. Is you're gonna have to
yeah.
get him a better batch. He needs a better chance. One thing I did find fascinating is I think it was in Tom Timmerman's article in the Post Dispatch, Jose Kojima. If you remember us talking about him at the end of last year when we first drafted him, he was we talked him up as a student of the game, how he brought scouting reports to every single team to the super draft in to prepare to present them as if he's done all his research. And it was Brandon McSorley that talked about the toast ravioli. So I don't want to throw Jose Kojima under the bus there. Sorry about that. But anyway, Kojima, in his student of the game mind, one of the things that he said in the Post Dispatch article is that he knew St. Louis from the Super Draft last year. He watched the Super Draft the year before, where it was held at City Park, and so he mentioned seeing the fan base, seeing the excitement, and how it's never been really
I
done
think you
before.
mentioned like how good this new guy Matt Baker was in that super draft feed.
I did have an immediate one of those like stage fright moments where I realized that I actually had a microphone in front of my face at that Super Draft with Jillian Stakovitz, and that was terrifying to remember. But I love the fact that he had that long-term memory of St. Louis. He knows what the fan base is like. He knows that we're that hardcore, that passionate, and he can expect that coming in. So that's going to, of course, excite you, regardless of what the team had done on the field. The fact that he's coming into a winning cultural environment, he has to be loving life at this point. And seeing him, he seemed a little taller next to some guys than I was expecting.
Yeah,
I'm excited
same.
to just see how he lines up and what kind of look we get from him, because he's not signed. Him and McSorley are not signed to the roster. And it doesn't really, we don't know how it's going to shake out. Like I said, we have an open roster slot. We don't have an open international slot that he would take. So I'm interested in those two and where they go. Fully expecting McSorley to land with City too, but Kojima is entirely up in the air.
Kojima also said that he's not at the level yet, but he wants to learn and he is
Yes.
learning. I love that honesty. And clearly, if you're admitting that you're not at the level, that means you're trying to get there, right? So that's fun.
He seems like he's a very down to earth,
Yes.
honest, and aware guy. That's huge for him to be aware at that age. That's, I mean, speaking wise beyond his years type of thing going on here. And you love that when you pair that with the physical talents that he clearly has, he could have a very bright future for St. Louis.
I also want to take it back a little bit in that Tyson Pierce's appearance in Florida also seemed to be surrounding that UPSL game. And so it felt like he played with UPSL,
Mm-hmm.
went down to Florida, and then we'll see, they won, right? So now
Yeah,
they got to play Columbus's academy in UPSL. And so we'll see if he returns for that. I'm sure he will. Um, Good experience, right? Big game. But, just to mention that UPSL game that they just played, it was a 1-0 victory to St. Louis. That doesn't sound impressive, but if you watch the game, St. Louis was so in control of that game. And they ended up with a lot of possession, which is not something with the senior team you would have liked. But they had a lot of ideas. They looked really good against Florida Premier. I thought they had more ideas. I thought our wingers, especially, were running them ragged and just being extremely dangerous the entire time. And no one in the midfield looked out of place. No one in defense, goalkeeper, no one looked out of place. Everyone looked in control. It looked like St. Louis was instilling their style of play on the other team and winning that kind of a tactical battle. Even though Florida Premier did have lots of counterattacking chances, they played a good game. It was close, but I loved how much St. Louis City controlled the game and how many ideas they had in the final third. It was really fun to see those guys make off-ball movements and that kind of stuff. But go look if you haven't seen the clip of Kai Pope scoring that goal. Oh my gosh,
it was sick.
sick! Gotta watch that one
And it was
and
facilitated
keep
by
watching it.
Jackson Delkus. And I'm
Yes,
glad you brought up the UPSL side because these are guys who will show up on City 2, and I would not be surprised at all if they started showing up this year to City 2. I don't know if it's a coincidence
oh for
that
sure.
we have yet to see a City 2 roster,
Yes,
but the UPSL side that's still playing, there are so City 2, just as a quick aside, has their own specific set of roster rules. They don't have anything to do with GAM and TAM, but it has to do with the number of players that you can have on your roster that are amateurs. City MLS Next Pro allows you to sign players to professional contracts and amateur contracts. If you think about guys who have played for City 2 in a D3 professional league and then gone off to college, uh, those are the kinds of players who are on amateur contracts, and that's how they're allowed to do that. I would look for a host, or at least a few, of these UPSL players to take a step up and find some time with City 2 this year. And if not this year, then next year, Jackson Delkus, who is, I think he's a City lifer in the sense of
yeah,
when City first started their academy, the U16s, U17s, he was a U16, and he's just risen ever since. He is a goal scoring machine. He's got the long hair and headband. You can't miss him. And he
right.
facilitated that goal by Kai Pope. He went to retrieve the long ball. He had the shot that hit the goalkeeper, bounced away to Kai Pope, and then Pope chipped the keeper.
Yeah, gosh, I'm trying to bring up who was the right wing Falpel. Anthony
Anthony
Falpel,
Falpel,
yeah.
who
Though they
played
both
for
looked equally good in their own ways, but I
yes.
mean, both of those wingers looked incredible. It was a fun game. I recommend you guys keep watching UPSL. I regret not watching more Academy, but here we are, grown men with families trying to keep up. That's how we roll.
Not this weekend, but next. February 2nd through the 4th are the national finals, the semifinal matches, St. Louis City against Columbus Crew, and then Chirlaco FC against Foro SC from California and Texas.
Semifinal games, right?
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff. Where to next, Matt?
Oh, let's take a look at City 2. Let's pivot right into that since we were just talking about City 2. They released their preseason schedule, so we have an idea of what their season's going to look like. And our friend from Mo Football, Musa Seka, is one of the biggest City 2 fans I can think of. Shout out for all the matches he took his family to last year and the coverage he gives that club. I love it. I love going to City 2 matches. My daughters enjoyed the heck out of it.
Me
That
too. My
family
boys love it.
environment, I
Yeah,
hope they foster it even more,
yeah.
but we know what that team's schedule is going to look like. And so hopefully we start to get a little bit of an insight in their roster. They're actually in training right now, January 22nd through February 9th. They are training in St. Louis at the Wash U High Performance Center. Their first match in preseason is February 10th against Union Omaha. They have some training in Florida from February 12th through the 21st. Then they have some matches. They come back to St. Louis February 24th. They play Memphis 901 on March 2nd. They play Forward Madison on March 9th to finish preseason. And then the unannounced MLS Next Pro schedule will begin after March 9th. But I am very interested in seeing what this roster looks like. I teased it earlier that there are a handful of players who are going to be returning. In fact, the current roster as we know it, as of January 25th, is just the end of season roster from last year. It has no goalkeeper signed. It has Michael Wenzel as the only signed defender. Larson Hackworth and John Klein are the midfielders, and Dita Armstrong is the forward. That is the only listed signees for sure signed at the end of last year.
And
Decline,
Kuzane is a maybe, right? Like they're still talking, and Walker is a maybe, the
he,
goalkeeper Walker.
yes, it had listed that, well, City 2 declined the contract of Eric Walker.
But no, they said they were still
They
in
declined the
talks.
option. They were still, yes. We
Still in
know
talks.
that Faisal Batashi is returning to England as best we know it. I look for Mo Football information on that. AJ Palazzolo retired. Stanislav Koval is gone. Ezra Armstrong is signing. Where did he sign? USL Championship.
Ezra? Oh, I forgot.
You look that up in a second. Juan Kuzane is out of
Schneider.
contract. Sergio Rivas is out of contract. Where I've heard we were negotiating. Negotiations are, yes, they confirmed negotiations were ongoing with Juan Kuzane and Sergio Rivas. They
Yeah.
could return, but it's a sparse roster, and these players signed to professional contracts. There's only 5 of them.
Oh, Ezra Armstrong, Pittsburgh Riverhounds.
Bingo. That's
Future
it.
star. That's what's going to happen there.
Love it. Love that for him so much. After what he went through to rehab and recover from his injury, we'll be following Pittsburgh for him.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for him to be there. Also, Schneider went to Indy 11. Good club there. New
Mm-hmm.
coach this year. It'll be interesting. They have a new stadium coming in the next couple of years. So if he hangs around there, I think he could become like an Indy 11 legend. Also, I completely forgot that Aiden Stanley is also at Indy 11. And then St. Louis has a ton of people at Charleston Battery. So like just
I think
stuff
you
to
got
follow in the championship this year is
I
like
think you got
awesome.
fact checked by chat, and Ezra Armstrong has been signed by North Carolina FC.
I think that's wrong, Scott. I don't normally go against someone, but I got Ezra Armstrong right in front of me in a Riverhounds jersey. So I think that might be wrong.
What year are you looking at, bud?
Oh, wait, did he get loaned there last year or something?
December 15th, 2023, the North Carolina FC announced his signing.
It's 2021. I didn't know he played in the Riverhounds in 2021. So sorry, Scott. My mistake. I
North Carolina.
rarely argue with people, and now we know why.
So North Carolina fans we are.
Yeah.
I love
I'm
it.
sad he didn't become a star at Pittsburgh Riverhounds. He should have stayed. No, we love him. We love him. I'm glad he spent
See,
time
this
there.
is going to be something to track though, is City 2 as well as City outgoing players, the alumni, so to speak. And no matter how many years you play, like our friend Brian Simpson, who runs the STL Soccer Tracker account, you always follow them. They're one of us always. And it doesn't matter what team they play for, what country they go to, Faisal, Ezra, any of these guys, we're going to follow them at whether we follow them a little bit, whether we see highlights of them, they're always going to be St. Louis at heart.
I think Soccer Tracker is the best of us, to be honest. I think they do the best work in St. Louis,
Big fan.
at least for free. MLS news round. Oh no, let's talk about our loanies. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's a perfect segue. Since that I'm working on my segues. We're still in preseason form. I'm getting these transitions going. So going from needing to track our loanees and alumni to actually tracking those who either just left the senior team or who we have a vested interest in because they're getting developed for us. This is a segment that I do want to keep on Flyover regularly, and so you can look forward to it, Phil. It's on our show notes, seeing it every
Sponsored by
single week.
STL Soccer Tracker. That's what we should do from now on as a joke.
Is that how sponsorships work? You just say somebody's sponsoring you and then they
Yeah.
pay you later?
I can
Need to
only
make note of that.
assume. Yeah.
Anyway, Isak Jensen is first up, and he should be first up. Viborg FF. He's had 3 friendlies in January as they gear up for their second half of the season after Denmark's winter break. Isak Jensen was a sub on January 12th in their first game back, and he started both games, January 19th and 25th since then. He has 3 more friendlies with Viborg upcoming before their season resumes on February 16th. But honestly, Jensen looks to be cementing himself right back in their starting 11, just like he was at the end of the first half of last season. Today, for instance, January 25th, in the match that he started, he set up the first goal, the highlight of which can be seen at the STL Soccer Tracker Twitter account. The Viborg team won 4-2, and we look forward to seeing what Jensen has to offer here in the next few matches. And this is a name, and as much as we love the next name, and so this Isak Jensen is a name that people can't forget. If you're talking about attacking help, Isak Jensen can play a forward left wing. He can be that person if he's ready to fill that type of a role. And so as he's coming back, we saw flashes of it with City 2. We saw a lot of it with City 2 actually last year, but we saw flashes of it with City. He has the potential. He's another player on a long-term contract through 2027. So he also has rumored loan with an option to purchase. So this is a wrinkle for Isak Jensen as we follow him and love seeing him do good things. Viborg's sporting director is actually the one who confirmed there's an option for purchase. They're telling local outlets in Denmark that. So that's going to be interesting to see what happens and if St. Louis ends up with a payday this summer versus a returning left winger.
I didn't think about that payday. That is nice. I get this vibe that Isak is very happy in Denmark. I'm not sure how much he liked it here, but even if he did, he's having so much success there. The fact that Viborg mentioned that there's a buying option means I think they wouldn't have said that publicly unless they were interested in taking it, and it makes sense. I tried to look up whether he was part of any of those 4 goals, Matt, and I guess you saw that he was part of one.
He set up the first one. He worked on the left side. He took the ball deep to the end line and then he sent it in. I don't know if he was officially credited with an assist because the ball was kind of bouncing all over the place, but he created that. He facilitated it. It was a shot creating action, as we love to say on the stats that we follow in season. And
clearly having success there. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. On the other hand, Selmer Pedro has no news, and that's probably going to stay the same for a while. He is currently rostered with FC's Lynn, who are on winter break until February 11th. So we will have probably no news on Selmer Pedro, other than I suppose he made a cameo in our news earlier about the green card information. And I guess we're just going to have to wait and see on him. You know, we talked last year enough about him. I don't want to get into it too much, but we'll continue to track him and how he's doing while he's officially on loan from City.
He was one I was watching, like, if we didn't sign a left back, we were going to have to use him this year, right? And we ended up signing a left back. So I think that's news in itself, right?
Yeah, the writing was on the wall when we signed Anthony Marcanic, and it became that much more clear when Nicholas Dewar was signed.
Agree.
So the other ones are the newbies. Miguel Perez on loan with Birmingham. Their season starts soon. We can watch him, hopefully, if he's ready with Atlanta on Saturday. We'll kind of keep tabs on Jared Stroud and Lucas Bartlett. I think it's fun to keep tabs on the City alumni who they're training in Saudi Arabia. Did you see this?
Well, I saw it because that DC reporter, Pablo, mentioned it today. And I was
Pablo
like,
Maurer.
Holy cow. What was the comment he used? They were, it's almost like they thrive in being irrelevant. They can get away with training in Saudi Arabia because they know no one cares. It's DC United, but that's weird. It's very weird that they're doing that. It's got to have some money involved, right?
There's no doubt monetary implications, but it's the fact that nobody really seems to be. Yeah, his quote was,
weaponizes its irrelevance. I'm so sorry.
DC doing most of their preseason in Saudi Arabia, weaponizing their irrelevance.
Wow.
Well so that, I mean, that the implication is pretty clear, right? It's the fact that nobody cares about DC allows them to do something shady for money, right? So you read shady.
That. Yeah.
And so, I mean, Lucas Bartlett and Jared Stroud are part of that. And not that they're, I didn't mean it like that. I don't mean it like that. I just mean they're on the team that their staff is facilitating weaponizing their relevance.
Say that I don't think St. Louis fans would like not throw a fit about that. I really, truly.
We're not irrelevant enough for our club to be able to weaponize anything.
There we go.
We're getting
spicy as the night goes on here, Matt.
It's these NA drinks, man. Yeah, Nico Gioacchini is the last one that we have on tap that we're tracking, and that's for reasons that we went way into detail on earlier. And that's an exciting one. I'll just reiterate the fact that as Nico goes, so go the coffers of St. Louis. As Como goes, so go the coffers of St. Louis. I
Mhm.
mean, they're intertwined for at least the next year, and that's a fact with a reported up to $2 million add-on. It's exciting to be able to track that. It's first of our kind, first of any kind like that. So not just first outgoing sale to Europe, first outright sale to a non MLS entity. There's a lot at stake with Nico that we're going to track.
I've done a terrible job limiting our time. We should only do one more thing, but um, since I've done a terrible job, I feel like we should
Could I
end
talk
with
you into two?
Sportico thing. Yeah, I think we should end with Sportico, and I think you should
Okay.
choose one more thing to maybe talk about.
Let's do the MLS news. There's a couple I want to hit on, and I thought this would be another nice regular segment because I think if there's one thing that we don't do, it's bring in the bigger picture type of a thing, league wide news or big things going on with other clubs that it's just nice to know because they're gonna come around to impact St. Louis. And the first one is Pedro de la Vega, which he's a if you follow any of the MLS transfer news, he was the biggest signing of the week, signed by the Seattle Sounders from Lanús in Argentina as Seattle's first ever young DP for an estimated $6.5 million transfer fee. He's a 22-year-old Argentinian winger who plays for their youth national team. And the fun fact for Seattle is that De La Vega has been wearing Lanús's number 10 for the past 5 years, and the last player to play for Lanús to wear that kit was Nico Ladero.
Hmm.
So there's some history occurring
Funny.
here. And by all accounts, the kid is legit. And I'm not saying he's the next Messi, but first young DP in Seattle's history, that's meaningful.
Yeah.
And Seattle is looking to replace Raul Ruidiaz, Nico Ladero. They have a gap in their attack, and this kid is going to be front and center. We play Seattle twice, so get used to the name Pedro de la Vega.
Some interesting stuff. If you listen to Extra Time, I'm just going to steal from them. Like, he is a dribbly boy. That he is someone that's going to look kind of like Celio, honestly, but probably insane, right? Insanely
Mm,
good, can score on a whim. And so it'll be interesting to see. I forgot what the guy's name is on the left, but he's like a real direct speedster. Kind of like a left-sided striker. And then this guy is going to have to be kind of the dribbly boy, the scoring guy, but also maybe the most playmaker type guy they have. So
yeah.
filling Ladero's role. We'll see how that plays out. And maybe they'll just look a little different and be fine. Maybe he'll have to figure out how to be the playmaker in MLS, which may be easy for him, may not be. That'll be a fun thing to watch.
The other big news that I do want to make sure we mention because it will have a direct impact to City if it follows through is that the MLS referees have authorized a strike. On Monday, January 22nd, The Athletic reported that the Professional Soccer Referees Association, which is the labor union representing the professional referees in North America and Canada, the United States and Canada, have voted to authorize a potential strike amid ongoing negotiations with the Professional Referees Organization, or PRO. The new CBA is at the crux of this, and this is not the first time that this type of a labor dispute has occurred. And the last time this happened, 2014, there was a work stoppage, and MLS took action prior to the actual strike. And what they did is they locked out the referees, which enabled them to hire replacement refs.
Mm-hmm.
History is it's assumed that history will repeat itself if the PSRA vote to strike. If no deal is reached by January 31st and they look to strike, MLS could lock them out, meaning that they can hire replacement refs for matches to begin the year. I don't even want to get into, I mean, we could speculate what replacement refs might look like as far as quality of officiating, which will invariably lead into jokes about the current level of officiating. So
Mm-hmm.
I just want to report the news on this one.
I don't. I want to take a side because,
Go for it, man.
well, it's just, I think it was really telling to me. I can be pretty harsh on the refs. I'm one that like really yells and tries to rally them to our cause and then applauds them at the end, right? I'm not down with any booing of refs
Mm-hmm.
after the whistle has been blown. I want to be real clear on that. But, I think it was really telling when we played Club America in Leagues Cup. It was CONCACAF referees, and I feel like it was really clear how bad those referees were compared to MLS. And I think everyone needs to take note of that because we're so hard on referees in general. And in that case, we shouldn't have just been mad about the refereeing in that game. We should have been like thanking the heavens that we don't have that every week in MLS seasons.
That's true.
And so I think we should all take note and support these guys. They deserve a good wage. They're quality referees. If you listen to an episode of Scuffed recently, if you scroll back and you look for when they interview a referee, you hear how seriously they take it. I know they're not like really good about like talking about how they referee, why they make their decisions. And so we're left like guessing, and often that goes negative. But we really do have good referees in MLS these days compared to what it was before. And so again, I think we should thank them. We should thank the heavens for every ref that we see anywhere in general, but we should also be thankful for what we get in MLS, and definitely take note of the difference in quality if we get these non pro referees filling in for them, for lack of a better, I can't think of a better word, but like they will be scabs. If you're a union rep kind of a person, like this is a serious matter that we shouldn't just forget about.
Yeah, last year I had the fortune to talk with Jen Cease a lot, covering St. Louis City at trainings and things. And that led into conversations with George Gansner, who a lot in St. Louis might know, former FIFA and MLS assistant referee. He's from St. Louis. He has some of the best takes on refereeing, and
Mm,
he calls in and he hosts segments and on KMOX often. And he is a source of knowledge, a wealth of knowledge, and his takes are always well educated. They're responsible, which is a word that I think is important when it comes to the conversations about referees, because you're right. Referees, they take the brunt of both sides. They get it from all sides in a match. There's nobody who is a fan of referees during a soccer match. And that's a job that they accept, they do well, and they take the abuse that they're given at times and they do the best that they can. They are there are different levels depending on different leagues around the world, but gosh, I mean, we know that we've had our fair share of complaints last year, but it comes from all sides. And at the end of the day, the level of difference between the refs who are part of the PRSA and the scabs, like you say, are going to be night and day.
mm.
And so when it comes to should you hope for anything out of this, like pro union, anti union, pro MLS referees, anti MLS referees, uh, the PSRA, the Professional Soccer Referees Association, will be a higher quality officiating crew than any potential replacement, which means better quality matches that we're going to get to see for St. Louis City. That
Yep.
in and of itself is a clear cut line for me to say that I hope either a deal can be struck or whatever needs to happen for this group of officials to continue refereeing our matches.
Absolutely. One to follow, and we'll keep you updated weekly about that. Lastly, we'll talk about Sportico has City valued as the 18th most valuable MLS team and worth $625 million with $70 million in revenue for 2023, which is tied for 11th in the league, which is really fun
Yeah.
to see. So many thoughts about this. I think about this kind of stuff a lot, but Matt, what did you think when you saw all those numbers?
The obviously the two numbers, the total value and the revenue. The revenue being tied for 11th was awesome to see
Yeah.
because, that you look at ticket sales, you look at jersey sales, and you compare it to populations of cities. The teams ahead of us, for instance, LAFC, Inter Miami, Atlanta United, LA Galaxy, Austin, Charlotte, FC Cincinnati, Seattle, Columbus, and Philadelphia Union. There are all kinds of ways you could describe those teams, from passionate fan bases to giant stadiums to mega stars that play for their teams to huge populations in their areas. And I think St. Louis is punching at our weight and what we should be in that, being in that caliber. So being heads and tails above teams like Sporting KC, who is 17th in revenue compared to St. Louis at 11th, punching above our weight compared to Nashville, who is even down at that same level. Chicago, way worse. I mean, you're seeing a clear difference in the teams that are at the top, the haves and the have-nots when it comes to revenue, passionate fan bases, people willing to buy your product, go to your games, buy your merch, and all of those things that go into what revenue is driven for a club. From a total value, I think it just makes sense. I'm not really surprised or anything related to, like, shocked from our total revenue, or total value rather, because the total value, and they have a methodology here on Sportico. So I just want to say that the methodology for Sportico is related to uh, deriving the market value based on each team's revenue, relying on publicly available information, financial records, and interviews with those knowledgeable of team finances, including 7 sports bankers and attorneys who actively work on MLS transactions. So they're taking every single facet of available data they can to come up with these valuations, taking into account, like you said, the revenue, the stadium cost, the land they own, the different, how long they've been a club, for instance, in historical context and what they've been building up to. Players can drive this, as Inter Miami had one of the biggest jumps year over year in total value, and it was directly attributable to Lionel Messi and his friends that arrived. So players can drive that total value. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a lot that goes into this, but seeing St. Louis where they are, from what we did in our first season, the cost of our stadium, the purchase of the land, the development of the training facility, all of those different things being privately financed, the debt ratio has got to be small in the sense that it was privately paid. They're not relying on public funds. There's not a city of St. Louis that owns part of the stadium type of a thing. This is full ownership, privately paid for, overwhelmingly, like 99.9% of it. I think our friend Dennis pointed out on X that there is a 1% sales tax that is classified as public funds, but a sales tax on goods and food and things, it's a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
Everything else makes sense to me, and I'm happy to see St. Louis in this position to start things. It only goes up from here to me.
I have a bleeding heart for Carolyn Kindle, because that family funded so much money up front for this kind of thing, and you're like, oh man, I feel bad every time we're like, well, spend money on this, spend money on that in the club. Like, I'd really love this to happen or that to happen, and every one of those things costs money. And we heard that they're passing a lot of the profit on from food vendors in the stadium. Instead of taking a large percentage of that, they're trying to make sure the quality is high and pass the profits on to the vendors themselves. Like, there's a lot of stuff the city's doing that is just like out of the kindness of their heart, and also just like trying to make St. Louis a better place, try to make a name for city itself on the international level. And so I look at these numbers because I love that the revenue was really high. Is that an expansion team sort of thing? Maybe we'll see what it is in the next 3 to 5 years. If it hangs in that area, it could just be a St. Louis thing, right? Like, we may just support the heck out of this team, especially if they do well. But Matt, I don't know if you were able to kind of do your best guess about what has been spent. MLS is not a cash flow business, right? It's not about how much money you make every year, because you're going to outspend that in salaries and acquisitions. And you look at what we made on Joaquini, well, we put way more than that into the players we've acquired up to this point. The academy, the money spent there. And so you think about what we made last year, but it's really where it comes in that's value to an owner if they're a Stan Kroenke kind of person.
Yeah.
It's what the club is worth. And you look at what they've spent. Someone like Stan Kroenke is looking at that bottom line and making darn sure that he's going to come out on top in the end. And you look at how that club operates, how all of his clubs operate for the most part, and you know that the bottom line is what's most important. With Carolyn Kindle, that is probably not true. But with Kindle, I also look at like what owners are trying to move MLS forward, not just city, make a name for city, which is the most important thing to me. It's all I really care about. But I get excited about the national team, the quality of players in the United States, in MLS. And I look at the roster rules, and I look at this number every year. What has each owner spent, and what is the value of their club? How much of a risk are they willing to take to make MLS a better club? Someone like Miami, they don't care, right? They're spending the
Yeah,
money. They're bringing in whoever they got to bring in. And
they'll
yes,
push the
that
limit.
comes into the valuation, as you said, Matt. That was really cool to hear that. But I'm just like constantly thinking about these kinds of things, and I also think about like when do we expand the stadium to be bigger? Because clearly we can sell it out, right? In the way things are now. I'm looking at these kinds of things in the future of city, what kind of club we are, what kind of club, what kind of league MLS is too.
Well, in that 625, you wonder where it comes from because to me, when I see team valuations or total valuations, that's how much somebody they expect somebody to be willing to pay for that entity.
A lot of
And
it's assets, right? I
yeah,
think you said that it's solid stuff like a stadium,
but it also so you
training
think about
ground.
you asked like what has St. Louis spent on and like where's all this money coming from that they're adding into the valuation, and you go over the methodology that Sportico has. St. Louis has spent probably upwards of that between the expansion fee they paid and the stadium and campus. Not counting, and you probably add into it like some of the player salaries, but in comparison, that 11 million is just
That's
a
true.
drip in the bucket. And so the expansion fee, the stadium and campus, it also it's almost like a base level of every single MLS team is a stake in MLS. And that's valuable. Like we've seen because expansion fees have risen exponentially over the past few years, there's implicit value in being at the table. And that
Hmm.
comes with this total value. So if you were to sell everything related to this club, you're selling your shares in MLS that are being valued at a base level of this $625 million. And that's on top of what we've spent on the stadium and all that infrastructure.
But that's yes, but I think the assets is probably most of that. Like I would say the clubs that have like a stadium owned by the city,
Mhm,
yes, MLS is valuable, but let's say the economy just like dies, or let's say MLS becomes a terrible league for whatever reason, it's not worth anything anymore. I still think that 625 million will be somewhere in the range of maybe 400 or 500 million because of the assets more so than the stake in MLS. But where it becomes important is the fact that the expansion fee that they're willing to pay an expansion fee that is so high. I mean, it's getting
mhm,
so ridiculously high. That shows like MLS owners may say, well, don't add more people. We're just like spreading our wealth too much now. Like the more we add, the more MLS's value gets distributed to more people. Like my stake is being thinned out by adding more owners. And so that expansion fee makes up for that. It's
yep,
like a buy-in situation. So
that's exactly it.
clearly MLS has value. So I don't want you to hear me wrong, but in dire straits, it's the assets that are going to bring the most money, and MLS has to bring at least 1 or 200 million of that, and I think that's shown by the expansion fee.
And I think I think we're kinda saying the same thing
We
because
Yeah, I'm not arguing with you. I'm sorry. No.
and 2, it's also perspective. LAFC is the highest valued MLS team at 1.15 billion, and CF Montreal is the lowest valued team at 440 million. You look at the teams at the bottom of that list: CF Montreal, Colorado Rapids, Vancouver Whitecaps, New England Revolution. There are one or more things you could look to that say, my point was that the expansion fee slash the stake in MLS is a base component of all these teams. You're looking at St. Louis having paid $200 million as a portion of what the total value could be. I mean, that could easily line up with some of these other clubs. Of
Hmm,
if you're looking at the total value of an MLS expansion fee now, I think it's up to 350 million, something like that, that San Diego paid.
I think so.
That as a huge chunk of the CF Montreal 440 million. Their stadium ish they have stadium issues. They've got a small stadium up
Yep.
there. I'm going to butcher the name. Colorado Rapids have a stadium that we know is in disarray. That's a good example to use. It's
Yeah,
it's in
like the
disarray.
scoreboard's broken,
The
right?
scoreboard's broken. It's in disarray. It's outside of a downtown area. Like there's not much to like about that provides value. So Colorado Rapids, who are valued at 440 million, you could easily make an argument that 300 million of that is their stake in MLS. Like they're not going to drop below that value because they exist as an entity in MLS, and that's what's being valued as a base of all of this. It's just it's just an interesting way to look at all of these things because the higher you go, you can start to see like where different teams have done the best work. And there are going to be LAFCs and Inter Miamis that are just never going to drop below. But I also view this as, how can St. Louis rise above this? Like what, and I haven't given any thought to it, but that's an interesting question that I keep thinking about is what does St. Louis need to do to continue to increase their value? Is it win? Does that just do it? Is winning a cup or a shield do that?
Mm.
Is it buying another land or stadium location for City 2 or so? I don't know.
Oh, that's a good question. And I want to be in the room when the owners talk about that. Or even like Garber might be like a financial consultant and be like, "Hey, if you want to grow the value of your club, these are things that people do."
Yeah.
Billy J says San Diego was 500 million, by the
500.
way.
I knew it was some
Holy
absurd amount.
cow.
This is what I get for not having my keyboard at my fingertips.
But I would love to hear like the most cynical pitch, right? Like if you want to grow the
Mm.
value of your club, do this or don't do this. That would be so much fun to hear. If I saw Carolyn Kindle and we were alone in an elevator, that's kind of the sort of thing I would ask probably. I wouldn't ask like the romantic things. I'd be like, no, let's talk money. Like, how do you make money with this, or what does Kroenke do if he's being super cynical about this? What does he do to like just like wring every cent out of this club kind of thing?
Well, that's another aspect too, is that we know Carolyn Kindle's viewpoint on this is mostly philanthropic. So she
Yeah.
didn't get into this I mean, this isn't a dig on her at all. She didn't get into this to necessarily win championships. I don't think that was like the drive. She said that multiple times. It's not the
Opposite of a
driving.
dig, by the way. Like she's awesome because of this.
Right. I could never say a bad word about her and all the things that she's
Seriously.
done for St. Louis and soccer and St. Louis at this point. But that wasn't the primary goal. Was to uplift St. Louis, to make St. Louis better on the global landscape, to bring notoriety, recognition, rise St. Louis, bring back the new spirit of St. Louis. And the fact that we have success in the first season, my hope and my kind of my expectation is that it's like you get a taste of it, right? You get a taste of that experience, you get a taste of victory, and you see what the crowds are like, and you're not going to want to let go of that. And so the opportunity to increase the value by winning, I think is the understanding that she's going to want to do that. Like the idea of opening the pocketbooks just a little bit more even comes
Yeah.
with that experience and all of the things that occurred in the first season that she's not going to want to let go of, and getting a taste of first place in the regular season in your conference, getting bounced in the playoffs, knowing that it can be bigger, it can be better. I think you're just having that drive now, and that's what I keep clinging to. As we're not going to spend 15 million on a new DP forward, but we're going to consistently spend more. We're getting these $500,000 transfer fees. We're going to have
Yeah.
upwards of a million five. It's going to get more, and she's got that taste of victory that she's not going to want to let go.
Absolutely. And the last thing I'll say is that like the Hunts, Dallas, FC Dallas fans have been so annoyed over the years because they're so cheap. They won't go and spend anything on a major player. They do invest on their academy, and that's been something they can brag about. And that's amazing. I think that's a model that other clubs have copied from them, especially. I think they were one of the first to do it. But now they've sold enough players over and over and over that they've not only funded the academy several times over by this point, they're now about to spend more than they've ever spent, and a Hunt is excited to do it. So that
Mhm.
means they've probably sold enough players that they're ready to spend some of that money again and invest it back in the club on a really good player to try to get wins, right? Not just be a developmental club, but to get wins. And that's something like I would love for us to sell so many players that we get there. I think that's what you're getting at, Matt.
That's the full circle thing that I talked about with Nico Gioacchini, is that the more players you sell, the more you can convert some of that transfer fee into GAM, and that increases the amount that you're able to spend in this MLS ecosystem here beyond DPs. Like if you're talking about spending up and down the roster, you enable that by transferring players out for the maximum value and being able to convert the max 1.157 amount of GAM. You do that over and over and over and over, like FC Dallas, like Philadelphia Union have done. You're going to build up this stockpile of GAM that doesn't expire, that you can just use however you want. And at some point, there's going to be a tipping point in all of this that you can just start spending up and down the roster.
I love it. And I think, well, let's call that the 10 or 15-year plan. We won't nail them down to 10 or 15 years, but that would be awesome if we start having such a surplus of transfer fees that we need to start spending it on players. Until then, I will be rallying Carolyn Kindle to the cause of allowing more depth in our rosters. Use that vote to our advantage because Lutz is too good. The academy is going to start producing players, and we're going to want to use them more than MLS is going to let us. So
Yep.
that's what we want in the near future, and I won't stop talking about it. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. This has been a long, fun episode. Clearly, when Matt and I get together, the wind down gets a little bit long. We haven't even come close to finishing all of our notes for the
Nope.
day, but it's been fun. Thank you for listening. If you made it this far, we'll be talking to you next Thursday night. If you want to join us live in the chat, we'll be on the radio every week for the foreseeable
Yeah.
future until they fire us. So, yeah, thanks for listening, everybody. More to come soon. Bye-bye.
Enjoy preseason.
That's right.